Welcome to another episode of Purpose Today. I'm your host, Dr. April Dobson, and I'm very excited to have a very special guest here on the show, Annamae Molina. She is a keynote speaker, a newly published author, and the founder of Proverbs 31 Bakery. You don't want to go anywhere. This is a very special episode. We're going to talk about breakthrough moments with purpose, the journey of resilience and self-discovery. And if you want to be equipped with ways that you can position yourself to be resilient, ways that you can navigate through self-discovery to align with purpose, and even ways to position yourself for the right relationships. You don't want to go anywhere. We're going to hear about Annamae's story and her journey and how God really wrote her story. And we'll have an opportunity to talk about her new book. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after these sponsorship messages. This episode of Purpose Today is brought to you by Purpose Today Global LLC in partnership with the Purpose Professionals community. If you're a professional who desires to align your profession with your purpose and you want to connect with a community of like-minded professionals to grow your career, continue to develop, and ensure that your business aligns with your purpose, join the Purpose Professionals community. The Purpose Professionals community has relocated to its new platform from school. If you want the link to the new platform, use the link in the YouTube chat. Welcome back to this brand new episode of Purpose Today with Dr. April Dobson as we talk about breakthrough moments with purpose, the journey of resilience and self-discovery. I'm so excited to introduce you all to Annamae Molina as our guest for the show. Annamae, welcome to Purpose Today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
You're very welcome. And I know I shared just a little bit about you in the introduction, but I'm sure we have people who are watching who want to know about your family. They want to know more insight regarding your bakery and your book. So just give us a little bit of insight about your family and your bakery and your book, whatever you would like to share with our audience before we unpack everything.
I've been married for 2 years. I have two great children. One's 20 and one's 18. Three amazing fur babies. Um, I have like 4 fish tanks. I love aquariums. Love nature. So very heavily involved in stuff like that. Like you mentioned, I'm an owner of Proverbs 31 Bakery. Been doing that probably a little over a year now, but been baking for many years. Um, and recently just finished my first book that God had been telling me for about 2 years now to to write about my past and how it led up to the relationship that He had set up for me that I have now been in for 2 years.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing about yourself and congratulations again on your new book.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And we're going to talk more about that a little bit later. Now, I know when you were sharing about yourself, you talked about, how God had really just allowed you to meet your husband and he really did some things to, position you for the relationship. And you also mentioned that, you had been working on the book for a couple of years and know that you're a newly published author. So can you just share with our guest when you started writing?
Oh gosh, I've honestly been writing probably since I was a little girl. I used to write poetry, short stories, haikus, all type of stuff. Poems. Not sure if I said that, but it's always been something I really enjoyed for most of my life. Probably in the past 10 years, I haven't really been doing it so much because I've just been busy being a mom and taking care of things and living life. And then just started recently again because God kept putting it on my heart to do this book.
That's good. I think that, what you said is probably going to inspire a lot of people. Because I know you said you started writing when you were a kid and you wrote for many, many years, and then you stepped away from writing, and
Mhm.
you did this because God was putting it on your heart. And, that is awesome that you were able to publish this book, and, that you had God helping you and nudging you. Did
Yes.
you have any other support for writing the book as you were navigating through it?
Um, Definitely from my husband. Because internally I kind of fought myself a little bit on it, because it's like I didn't really want to write about my past, because a lot of it's pretty private and sometimes like when I think about how God brought me and him together, it sometimes sounds so far-fetched and so like impossible. So it's just like, will people even believe this? But my husband kept telling me it doesn't come down to what people believe and don't believe. You share from your heart and it's true. So
Yes. I'm glad he was encouraging you to do that. Now, I know that one of the things that you said is were apprehensive about writing about it
mhm.
because of, what you had experienced and what you had gone through, and you really didn't want to share that part of your story because of the experiences that you had.
Yeah.
But I really truly believe the scripture that talks about we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And there may be some people who are watching this live stream or they go back and
Mhm.
watch the video of this podcast episode. And so God has brought you through so many challenges and hard trials. What advice would you give to anyone who might be viewing just to give them hope?
Um, Honestly, I think just the simplest, like, biggest advice I could give to someone that is like struggling with hope is that we have to remember that God did say in this life that we will go through trials and tribulations. He never guaranteed an easy life or anything like that for us. But he gives us a hope by giving us a savior that loves us and guides us and wants to be with us. And so I feel like as long as no matter what you're going through or how you're feeling or anything, he understands and he's there for us and to always just lay it at the feet of Jesus. And as long as we always do that, genuinely, everything's going to work out and be okay, no matter what the outcome is. I can't hear you.
You said something that I know will help people, and you said just taking whatever it is and laying it at the feet of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And for people who may not be people of faith, I would encourage you to consider, what Annamae just said, because there is a weight that is
Mm-hmm.
lifted when you're able to lay down your burdens, when you're able to cast your cares on Him because He really cares for you.
Yeah.
And I know that like you, there's a lot of situations in my life that I only was able to come out on the other side because of
Mm-hmm.
God, because of my faith. And really, it wasn't me, but it was what was done for me and what I received. And, knowing that we have the ability to, to take whatever it is to God and lay it at the feet of Jesus, as you said, and allow
Mm-hmm.
Him to heal, allow Him to restore, allow Him to really take what we've experienced And he goes beyond just healing physical infirmities. He can also heal and mend the broken heart. So thank you so much for, for sharing that. And there's a peace that
Mm-hmm.
comes
Yeah.
with that. So
Right.
thank you for sharing that. And I know you alluded to it a little bit about how God was able to orchestrate you meeting your husband. And I know that you all have an amazing love story that only God orchestrated. So,
Yeah.
can you share a little bit about how you met your husband? And I know we'll talk more about it as we continue on, but
Mm-hmm.
can you just give us an overview of how you met your husband?
So I met my husband in Tampa, Florida. I had actually moved to Tampa, Florida, September of 2021. Yeah. And probably a couple months later, I had joined like this singles group. And through that singles group, I ended up becoming friends with a couple of people. And one of those people, I met his best friend, who was Dominic, who is now my husband.
So, I really appreciate you giving that insight on how you moved because I think that some people, God tells you to move, He tells you to
Girl.
go somewhere, He tells you to do something, and it may not make sense, and you don't know what's on the
Yeah.
other side.
Yes.
Um, and so, can you just give a little bit of insight of where you moved from and
Yeah.
whether or not the move for you was did you move right away? Did God have to really push you
He
out
did.
of where you were into Tampa?
He very much, yeah, it was definitely a power struggle between me and God when it came to moving because I was living in Biloxi, Mississippi, and I loved Biloxi, like loved it. Was very happy there. Had my own massage business. Me and my son were thriving really well. Had a great church. Life was just, it was just great. It was really, really great. And um, God, probably about a year before I moved, started telling me that I was basically moving, that I was leaving. And I was just like, no, no, I'm not doing that. And even like every excuse I gave, like, oh, I have an amazing business. Or I have this, or I have that. I can't leave because of this. I can't leave because of that. And he removed every single excuse out of my life one by one to literally where I had nothing left. And I had to be like, okay, God, what do you want from me? Like, what do you want me to do? And that's when the whole Tampa situation came up. And I packed up and I left. And I will definitely tell you, there was probably some like spiritual, like, claw marks of like me just holding on to Mississippi as I was going down the road because spiritually my spirit was crying all the
Yeah.
way there. Like, I do
Yeah.
not want to go.
You said something, and I'm asking these questions because I believe there are people who will see this who have had a similar circumstance that God is telling them to do something. They have reasons why they can't do it or why they don't want to
Mm-hmm.
do it. And you
Right.
said every reason that you gave, one by
Mm-hmm.
one, those things were, you know,
Yeah.
um, moved out of the way so that
Yeah.
there was no
Excuse.
obstacle or excuse in the way
Yeah.
for you to move. At what point did you say, okay, all right, I see things that are being,
Mm-hmm.
taken away. I see things that are being moved. Okay, now I surrender. At what
Yeah.
point did you say, I'm going to surrender?
Um, that's kind of a hard one. So, like, when I lost my business, definitely is when I lost my business. Because I loved working for myself. I loved creating my own schedule. I loved my clients. I loved where I had my place at, and it was an amazing location. like I said, was just very comfortable. I'm one of those, like, if I'm comfortable and happy where I'm at, I'll be that happy little hermit that doesn't want to move. Like, like you will have to beat me out of my shell to get me to move, you know? And I was definitely being a hermit with my business. And unfortunately, something happened, which I won't go too much into it because it is talked about in the book. But just basically a situation happened that led to me losing my business. And while in the situation of losing my business, Tampa kept being offered to me. And I kept pushing it away. But then when I got to where it's like I lost my business, I was struggling with work, I was struggling with this, I was struggling with that. And I finally was just like, okay, I either need to obey or things are going to probably continue to get worse.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad that you finally said, okay, I'm going to obey. I need to obey. And for people who are watching, you may not realize, because some people discredit God speaking to them. They're like, oh, God doesn't speak to me. But, you know, people ignore the deep, deep, deep desire that God is putting on the inside of them. And it could be to move. It could be to start a new business. It could be to apply for a new position. It could be, you know, whatever it is, right?
And it could be something as simple as just go talk to your neighbor.
Yes, yes, something just as simple as go talk to your neighbor.
Yeah.
So thank you. Excellent, excellent example. And really, in the going and in the doing, other doors are open. And you end up discovering more that you need to discover in the process. It could be meeting someone who you need to meet. You know, in your case, you met your husband. It could be connecting with community. You mentioned about the singles group, which we might get into that a little bit more. But whatever it is, if you have this deep desire, don't ignore it, right? You know, of course, for the people of faith who are here, if you know that this is something that God has been telling you, just do it. If you're not a person of faith, or you're not sure if God is speaking to you, then, you know, you can pray, you know, and I just encourage you to move on those desires. So you talked a little bit about meeting your husband, that you had a mutual connection, the singles group that you went to at the church that you found in Tampa, which was how you and I ended up meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's how our friendship started. You actually got invited by a mutual friend. So when you were, introduced by a mutual friend. So when you got introduced by this mutual friend, was it right away you hit it off, or what happened after the introduction? Can you give us a little bit of insight on that?
So actually, our introduction ended up actually being at a UFC like premiere at a restaurant, like restaurant slash like sports bar. And like we sat and talked for a few hours while we were watching the fights and stuff. But beyond that, like we met at the beginning of 2022. And we really, I wouldn't even say we were friends, to be honest. We were more like acquaintances that I would see in the past, because he wasn't involved in church, he wasn't involved in the singles group, so it wasn't like I saw him, you know, through that. But the very few times that I hung out with his friend that was involved in the group, most of the time he was there with him. So we would like see each other in passing and have conversations, you know, hanging out in similar areas. But it never was beyond the, hey, how are you? You know, good. Life is great. Take care. You know.
Okay.
You know
So very surface. So
very surface
level.
Yeah. So when things started happening between us, it was very much a surprise.
Okay. So was there were there pivotal moments along the way? Like, what were the things that happened from being, hey, this is someone who I see in passing, we have a mutual friend, this is an acquaintance, I don't really talk to him outside of these mutual places where we cross paths. What were the pivotal moments that occurred between then and when you actually started connecting on a deeper level and courting or
Mhm.
dating?
Okay. So I started getting a little like I call them like kisses from heaven almost. Kisses from like heaven moments. So one of the things I told God because I have unfortunately have been married twice. Both of them were not the greatest relationships. Um, so when I left my second marriage, I told God, I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm putting it in your hands. These are the signs I need. And I gave him like three different signs of confirmations in order for me to believe that someone is my husband. And I even told, like, I was like, God, I need these signs before I will even entertain a person, and I even had people tell me, how can you expect to know who somebody's like, how do you expect God to tell you who someone's your husband before you even start dating? I was like, that's expectation I need in my heart, and God will make it happen. And he did. So,
That's good. You said something. You said that there was a point where you weren't even open. You were not even open.
no.
And so God had to shift you. He had to shift your heart to even be
Mm-hmm.
open to
Yeah.
consider a relationship or a marriage.
Yeah.
What was that shifting and that restructuring? What was that transformation
Mm-hmm.
process like that God took you through?
Well, so in the past, like I said, I've been married twice. Both of them were abusive. Um, First one was more like physical and like emotional. The second one was more like mental. Um, but and both of them were not like believers of God either. Um, and that's why I was like, I can't entertain nothing else unless it's of you and he has a belief in you. But I think the shifting point for me, um, I think another reason why Tampa was a thing is because the group I did get involved in, one of the ladies of the group had her own like personal group on the side that we would meet once a week and do Bible study. And in that Bible study, we did a lot of like healing and deliverance and sharing things. And so in the process, it really allowed me to go through things and finally face things from my past that I'd always just kind of like shoved down. So it was like Tampa was my healing ground, but was also my path to what God had for me for husband.
That's good. That's good. Thank you so much for sharing that. Um, Given your journey, what would you say to encourage people who are not married and they're watching this and they may have a desire for marriage? What encouragement would you give them?
Well, I think one of the biggest encouragements I would give them, and that I run into a lot of people, because I'm 40 years old, so being only married for 2 years, um, one, you're never too old. God's timing is perfect. So whether his timing is for when you're 20 years old or 80 years old,
Yeah,
he knows what he's doing, and just trust the process.
that's good. That's really good. Thank you for that. Now, I know you said earlier there are some things that are in your book and you didn't talk about them. So, those of you who are watching, you have to go and get Annamae's book. And so your book shares a lot of hope. It shares a lot of insight
Mm-hmm.
on the love story, your love story, and your husband's love
Mm-hmm.
story that only God wrote. So, can you share with our viewers a little bit about your book? Don't want you to give away all the spoilers, and what value viewers would gain from reading your book.
Okay. I think the biggest one, like I'll share one of my favorite parts of our love story. Um, so I used to make a joke with a couple of the ladies in the singles group about how God would have to like knock me upside my head and I would have to fall over into my husband's arms to believe to believe that he was my husband. And it was not one of the signs that I had told God I needed that was just between me and him. Um, but it was just honestly meant to be more of a joke than actual reality. But God can even take our jokes and be like, haha, watch this. And it literally happened while we were at a restaurant, and it was for one of my friends that was part of the singles group, and we all went to a crab broil place. And as we were after we got done, Dominic came, which he normally does not come to events like that. I think that was the first time I actually saw him hang out with like a whole group like that in like the singles group setting. So when I saw him come in, I was kind of surprised. But like I said, once dinner was done, I was scooting out of the booth that I was in. Um, and he actually came over and started talking to me while I was scooting out of the booth. Being
Wow.
distracted, looking at him. I wasn't paying attention to how close I was getting to the end of the booth, because it's one of those really long booths. Like we're talking about maybe a 15-foot long booth. And I was like in the middle of it. So I'm scooting down quite a ways, you know. So I'm looking at him talking, and I literally fell off the edge of the booth. But
Wow.
but before I hit the ground, Dominic ran around the table and grabbed me before I hit the floor. And
Wow.
like he picked me up, fixed my hair, asked me if I was okay, and I just like laughed. I was like, yeah, I'm good. And I left, and I'm driving home, and I heard God's little voice where he's like, he caught you, right? And I was just like, you got to be kidding me. I was like, Lord, no, there's no way. Not my husband. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. And that was probably March of 2023. And by November of 2000, that November of that year, he revealed to both of us in an arranged date that he set up for us. We'd even set up. And by the end of that night, Dominic said he knew I was his wife.
Wow. Wow. So I love what you've shared, because you talked about, one of the things that you had said, you were just saying it jokingly. And so it's so important what we
Mm-hmm.
say, like what we
Yes.
say with our mouth, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, God doesn't see things.
He's like,
We
that's
have
not a joke to me.
such the ability to create with our words. So it's
Yes.
important what we say. But
Yes.
you also talked about how God really just orchestrated things for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about one particular night that you actually had a date. Was that your first date? And
Mm-hmm.
can you give us a little bit of insight about it, or would it be a
Yeah.
spoiler for
No,
the
it's
book?
okay. Yeah, I can share a little bit. But so basically, October 3rd, of 2023, Elevation Worship, was in town for a concert. I had been wanting to get tickets, but I didn't have the money to do so. So I didn't even plan to go. And the morning of the concert, one of my really good friends called me and told me that her daughter had went into labor early. And I was the very first person she thought of about giving me tickets to. And I was like, oh, girl, I don't have the money, but thank you so much for thinking of me. She's like, no, they're a gift. Take them. And she's like, I have 3 of them. So I tried to talk my son into going. He was not interested. I called everybody I could think of in the singles group. Nobody wanted to go. But the whole time I'm looking for somebody, talking to my son, talking to everybody, I kept hearing, reach out to Dominic, reach out to Dominic. And I was just like, no, I'm not reaching out to him. I don't know him like that. I was like, I'm not doing it. I was like, plus, I think it was also because I was scared, because beyond the event of him catching me, other signs started coming almost like every other month that built up to October, that God was revealing to me more and more that yes, this is your husband. And I was like kind of scared, because I was like, no, I don't want to be the one to initiate. I'm not doing that. And but I did say, but if I can't find nobody, I'll ask them. And of course, I found nobody. And so I text him, and I was like, "Hey, I had these tickets. Do you want to go?" And within seconds, he answered, "Oh my gosh, I've been looking all day for a ticket." And I
Wow.
was just like, "Are you serious?" And but he was also trying to take his cousin because it was his cousin's birthday. And I was like, "Oh, look at that! I have an extra ticket as well." So we all went, and in that, like being at the concert, he said that he looked over and God was like, "That's your wife."
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, I know you said that you went to an elevation worship concert, and I
Mm-hmm.
remembered earlier in the interview you were saying when you first started going to City Life, he wasn't going to City Life. Did
Mm-mm.
something change between when you met him in 2021 and when you went on that first date in 2023?
Yes, definitely. That's one of the things I definitely said. I would never, ever, ever entertain anyone that wasn't following, a path of God. And like right before the event at the restaurant of me falling, he actually started showing up at church like a couple weeks before that. And before that event too, like every time I saw him, I would, after we would leave whatever we were doing, I always caught myself on the way home like praying for him and his like faith, like, God, like work on his heart, let him get to know you, build a relationship with you. So yeah, probably from from the first time I met him to a year later, he walked into church and started coming and getting involved. He never got involved in the singles group though, but yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Um, you just have a wonderful love story, and God truly wrote it,
Mm-hmm.
and just how He changed him, how He changed you, how He positioned both of you,
Mm-hmm.
for what He had for you, and I want to get into if there's guests who are watching and they want to actually purchase your book, what would they need to do to purchase your book?
Okay. Well, there's two ways. They can go to Amazon and look up God's Glory in My Story by Annamae Molina, and it will bring it up. It's on there on for Kindle, hard cover, and paperback. And there's also what you can see on the screen right now, is my website. And at the bottom of the website, there is a link for the hardcover and for the paper cover.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. And I'm going to make sure that all of those links are in the chat so that anyone who is viewing can purchase it on your website. It's on the screen. But if they're interested in purchasing your book on your website directly, they can do so. Or if they want to go to Amazon, I'll be sure to make sure that all of those links are in the chat so that they can um, hear this part of your story that you have not shared today, because there's just not enough time, right?
Right.
Everything that God does, there's just not enough time to share it all.
Yeah.
Just in this setting. So I know that how God shifted you and how He shifted your husband. And, we're not going to get into all of it today because we just don't have time. But I
Yeah.
just know through our friendship that there's things that God is continuing to do in
Mm-hmm.
both of you and how He's shifting you.
Right.
So, and I know purpose is playing a big part of that. And I want us to talk a little bit about purpose before
Mm-hmm.
we start winding down.
Okay.
So, what's the significance of purpose in our lives to you?
I honestly feel like the significance of purpose is almost, especially God's purpose, is the whole point of our lives.
Yes.
Um, Even in the mundane things that we're just like, I don't understand why you want me to do this. Everything has a reason. Rather it's to train you, to prepare you, to get you in the right location, in front of the right people. All of it has a purpose to lead to what's going to glorify Him.
Yes.
So as long as you're pursuing His purpose, it's gonna work out.
That's good. Thank you for sharing that. So I know that you have some things that are on the horizon. So what's next for you? And if you feel at liberty to share what's next for you and your husband, if you want to share that, but I will leave it up to you if you just share what's next for you or what's next for you all as a family and your
Well,
son.
there's a couple things that are kind of like brewing, and we're just kind of seeing how it goes. But one of the biggest things is that when we first got married, God moved us to Texas. Dom got offered a job like right after we got married, and within 2 months after we got married, we moved to Texas. And in that process, my husband has came in contact with some people, and he has now been offered a scholarship um, at a Bible college because he expressed to somebody that he knew that he wanted to learn how to evangelize, and but he really wanted to learn how to get deeper into the Bible so that when he spoke to people, that he really knew what he was talking about and how and would be able to answer people's questions. And in the process of talking to this guy about it, and Don didn't even know this, but the guy was like, actually, I own a Bible college. I'll sponsor you. So when your contract ends with your boss, um, you're gonna have to move to Ohio if you want to take advantage of this. So our next pit stop is Ohio. But we both know that that is not our final destination because we have gotten some confirmations that we might actually be moving overseas
That's awesome.
to evangelize.
That's
um,
awesome.
so we just don't know when. God is God's timeline. We thought it was going to be right after his contract ended with work, but God was like, nope, you're going here first and getting some training first. So that's the next thing in process. But for me, God's been putting it on me to write another book. It's gonna be called It Wasn't Just the Cross. It's gonna really kind of deep dive in possibly everything that he probably faced as a child, what his family possibly went through, and everything else he went through, and probably the psychological impact and the legal impact of what he probably really went through that is kind of touched on, but not. I don't think some people just realize like Jesus went through some stuff.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like, oh, he started his ministry and then he went to the cross. Like his whole life, he went through some stuff.
Yeah. Well, very exciting. Your new book, your relocation that's coming up, and also Dom's embarking on Bible college. So all very exciting, and even the relocating internationally eventually.
Mm-hmm.
So just very excited for what God is doing in you and Dom, your entire family, and the doors that he's continuing to open. And I know that even this interview and both of your lives is such a blessing to others and definitely brings hope for people who may have had some challenges to know that you don't have to stay in the middle of those challenges. Even people who are still experiencing challenges now, that there's a way through and out of those challenges. So thank you so much for sharing that. Is there anything else that you want to share before we conclude with those who are viewing the live stream and those who will watch the video later?
I think the only thing I really want to share that kind of just popped in my head when you asked that is that remember that even when God brings you your person or brings whatever to you, it doesn't mean that everything's going to be amazing. Trials and tribulations still come along with all of those. And just like your relationship with God is a choice to get up every day and pick up your cross and follow him, same is your relationship in your jobs and with your spouse, your friends, your family. It's a commitment, and especially in a world that has become a world of just throw things away when it gets hard. you know, us as Christians, we're meant to hold on and work through the situations. So even though God ordained this relationship has definitely had its ups and downs, but it took choosing to follow God's purpose to keep working through it.
Thank you
So
for sharing that.
you're welcome.
No, go ahead. You were going to say something else.
I honestly forgot. So maybe for next video, I'll come back.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And I so appreciate the way that you shared that, because you talked about how, be it a relationship with a spouse, someone who God is introducing you to, or
Mm-hmm.
bringing you together with as a spouse, or if it's someone who is a colleague at work.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned all different environments, because every
Mm-hmm.
relationship requires that we put in effort and we put in,
Right.
the work. But it's using the right approach and the right framework, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being able to forgive, being able
Right.
um, to have the opportunity to go to someone and share with them a
Mm-hmm.
concern that we have or an issue that we have. And it is a choice.
Right.
And I really appreciate you sharing that. I think that's going to be instrumental for people who are watching. And
Mm-hmm.
no, that doesn't mean if someone is abusing you that you need to keep taking the abuse. That's not what we
No,
are saying. We are not
no,
saying that.
not saying that
We
at
are
all.
saying that when you have even
Mm-hmm.
a healthy relationship
Right.
and both people are they're not abusive, they're not toxic people. We're
Right.
saying that there may still be some
Yeah.
challenges that you face. Your
Mm-hmm.
faith might be tested and tried, but
Yeah.
it's using the right approach in
Right.
situations to ensure that you're able to have the right solutions and come on the other side.
Yes.
I think that is super super important. So thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you,
Mm-hmm.
Annamae, for being a guest today. It has been such a joy to have you on Purpose Today with Dr. April Dobson. So many nuggets and wisdom and everything that you shared. And thank you for your transparency in sharing your story. You said something earlier about purpose. It's about God getting the glory. And He has
Mm-hmm.
certainly written your story. He is certainly continuing to get the glory as you're sharing. So thank
Mm-hmm.
you so much for being a guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. And thank you to all of those who are watching this episode of Purpose Today with Dr. April Dobson and our very special guest, Annamae Molina, as we've talked about breakthrough moments with purpose, the journey of resilience and self-discovery. I really encourage and challenge you all to make the commitment to remain resilient, make the commitment to have the process of discovering your purpose and the purpose that God has for you. Make the commitment to deepen your relationship with God for those who have a relationship. And for those who don't, there is an opportunity to have one. And I do want to encourage those of you who are watching who felt like you were in a situation that you've given up on, the idea of a relationship. Annamae talked about how there was a period of time where she was not open to it. And I've had that experience before, and God had to
Mm-hmm.
heal me. And we all go through a healing process that He takes us through. But I encourage you to remain hopeful, to remain in faith, remain confident that God has something for you. And whatever your purpose is that He has for your life, it's important that you walk in that purpose. So we appreciate you watching today. If there was a question that you put in the chat that we didn't have an opportunity to answer, I do encourage you to reach out to Annamae. There's a way that you can contact her on the website. And I encourage you to consider purchasing God's glory in your story. And so until next time, we thank you for viewing this very special episode of Purpose Today with Dr. April Dobson and our very special guest, Annamae Molina. We are truly grateful for each and every one of you, and we thank you so much for tuning in. And until